Hello, everyone. We are at the end of the day for the Helium House. I am Jacquelyn Melinek, and I am very fortunate to be joined here today with some wonderful panelists. At the end, we got Scott Sigel, the head of Helium Foundation. We got Tushar Jain, the managing partner and co-founder of Multicoin Capital. And then we got Dani Royo, the Syndica's research engineer. Of course, we're going to be talking about DePIN, but more specifically Helium and kind of the market opportunities that exist today. I think by starting off, let's maybe get a lay of the land and kind of the perspectives from each of you, because you bring different perspectives to the panel. You know, as the market opportunity for DePIN has expanded over the recent quarters, how do you kind of think about the biggest opportunity in the sector today and maybe something that wasn't able to exist in previous cycles?
So I think that, first of all, I think the goalposts have shifted for sure. To back in the days when Helium launched, it was enough to prove that you could incentivize the build-out of supply, build out a physical network. And I think at this point, really, whether you're talking about a protocol product, like holding yourself accountable to actually showing that demand, showing that network utilization, and showing that trajectory, I think really matters right now. I think it's been proven, whether you're talking about wireless or energy, data networks, that the enterprise problem is out there and that it can be solved, and there are people who are out there and willing to listen. I think the reality is that you need to be able to show that traction now, and I think that that's the thing that has fundamentally changed, of where you need to see that network utilization to validate not just that the network needs to exist, but that it is solving a core problem that somebody is willing to pay for.
Yeah, I think that is one of the core things that has changed over the last couple of years. Back 2 years ago or something, people were not willing to pay that much for transacting on chain, and now, especially in Solana, you see the revenues have come up a ton. Solana has been the network with more revenues for I think 18 months and running, and well, DePIN is one of the sectors, aside from meme coins, probably the sector that has the most revenue. And DePIN is by far the Solana project that has the higher revenue. I think it's 75 of all DePIN revenue last month was for DePIN. So yeah, I think that is what has changed. So crypto in general has gone from a place where projects promise a lot to a place where users are willing to pay for those services. And that is where we are all going. And if you cannot show revenue, if you cannot show that your project is something that users will pay for, then you're kind of dead in the water. Thankfully, Helium is not dead in the water at all.
I have a slightly different thing I'm excited about that has changed over the past couple of years, is really the regulatory environment is entirely different now. We have had 2 of our portfolio companies, DePIN portfolio companies at Multicoin, receive no action letters from the SEC, 00 and Fuse Network. And that's a huge change. And something that I'm looking forward to is potentially the merger of equity and tokens into some sort of hybrid thing that is now going to be allowed and previously was not allowed.
Is that a segue for MetaDAO or an ownership coin, or some kind of different setup?
Yeah, I think MetaDAO is super interesting, actually. I don't know that that's exactly how decisions should be made, but I do like the putting your money where your mouth is on electing directors, for example, of the company. I don't love the idea of shareholders can just vote to shut down the company at any time, because why are we empowering activist hedge funds that much, right? So there's some trade-offs. I'm a fan, though.
What about kind of the different market opportunities from a regional perspective? Obviously, we're in the UAE right now, and then Tushar brought up the situation in America, which has definitely lightened over the past 12 months. But for you specifically, maybe Scott, to start, how do you kind of think about expansion and the different opportunities through the markets?
Yeah, so let's go back to why Helium matters in the first place. I think it's a fundamental, I always like to go back to why. And so if you look at all the placards outside, it says connectivity rebuilt. What does that mean? You're talking about a model that is nearly 100 years old at this point, and telcos spending, again, I'm just going to aggregate number, 10 to 20 billion on CapEx every single year for towers, real estate costs, upkeep, maintenance. They're looking to offload those costs. Yes, pun intended on offload. But as we're looking at market opportunities, certain places where you've got kind of fragmentation of telco, where you've got a problem around, you're looking for redundancy and resiliency of coverage. One of the big things that Helium is really solving for is around indoor coverage solutions. So large transit centers, large arenas, where you need to have robust coverage in kind of large foot traffic zones. That's how we're starting to look at those international markets of where's their density, where's their fragmentation, where's their insufficient coverage, or where do we need to add to that where you don't necessarily have a state-owned telco, but you might have, 3 to half a dozen large telcos that are looking to think about expanding their footprint. So where can we activate a community-built network that is actually complementary to the existing carrier networks, and bringing in a lot of the economic value that Helium provides in some of these newer markets. So we do have, a number of pilots that are active. U.S., obviously, we've got Helium Mobile. We have a lot of active carrier partners in the U.S., but some of the other places in South America, in Western Europe, and Southeast Asia, where we do see carriers who are now paying attention and looking and seeing this is fundamentally more capital efficient for us to do things this way. And some of that's a culture shift because certain carriers like Verizon in the US, they like to own their infrastructure, and plenty of others are already forward thinking of, we need to offload these costs. We need to bring down our CapEx so we can improve on margins in general. It's a global issue. So yes, we think about that kind of expansion regionally in terms of density and where there's a lot more of that kind of fragmentation and competition through traditional carriers.
How do you guys kind of think about the educational component of that? Because I've seen the Helium ads on the subway, and nowhere does it say DePIN, right? And I think if it did say DePIN, you would scare off 99.9% of subway riders from ever considering using it, right?
Yeah.
So obviously that's intentional, and I think that's something that we see now with successful teams that have reached a base outside of just the crypto audience. So kind of walk us through like the mindset there, and then maybe both of your perspectives from the infrastructure side and the investors.
Yeah, so really quick so there's two things. Again, like we talked about this in an earlier panel of how do you abstract away some of the crypto complexities where the end user or the customer, like they don't need to know about it to get that economic value. So Helium Mobile is the carrier. We have pulled away all the crypto components because it's an easier onboarding. It's easier from educating. It is just a low-cost carrier where you can go and sign up and have a $0 plan that just works. It is just that simple. It's just a matter of getting in front of people. So on the carrier side, that's where we think about removing the crypto components. And then on the network side, where we're going and working with large carriers as an offload solution. So think about that for folks in the room that don't know. It's just basic roaming where we're leveraging an existing standard. It's just called Wi-Fi Passpoint. The idea of we're coming in and meeting people where they are. You need to offload. You need to be able to expand your footprint for your customers. They're already used to doing that in airports, in arenas. We're just coming and saying, hey, we can do it cheaper. So we're speaking them in the terms that they already know and they're familiar with, and we're just, again, pulling away a lot of the underlying crypto components to make sure we can meet people where they are, whether that's on the carrier side and subscribers or working with large telcos.
Yeah, if I want something to add, only like I as a customer, the only thing I care about is my bill cheaper and is my coverage better. I don't care if it's running on crypto on DePIN. There's so many people that I keep bumping into from the States that like they use Helium, and I'm like, do you know that it's crypto? Like my company actually like provides infra for them, and they're like, yeah, I have no clue. And I think that's what we want to get to, right?
Yeah, I'll maybe put it in a more succinct and punchy thing. I don't like education. I don't want to have to educate users to do anything. I think the best products require no education because they're just so obvious and intuitive that you don't need to teach anyone anything. They just know. They know how it works. So I try to find products where you don't need to educate the audience.
Do you think the infrastructure is there today, where it's just like that easy?
I mean, that's the thing about Helium, right? It doesn't use Solana infra for that much. Like it uses for like governance, and it uses it for keeping track of the rewards, like what rewards I need to sell, and like burning credits to like have I don't know, a list of like what the revenues are on chain, and it keeps like that. It does perfectly. It doesn't need to do anything else. So like definitely the inference there on the crypto side, and then on the networking side, maybe you can talk about that.
As far as if the infrastructure is there, I mean, look, I think at this point we are at a phase of our growth where, I mean, look, we sunset our own L1. Everything is running on Solana. I mean, the whole idea of like, what is a general purpose L1 supposed to do? You know, high throughput, low latency. It can handle the volume of transactions for a human scale application. You know, things tend to, I mean, they basically just work. At this point, we are at the part of our growth story, which is about marketing, reducing cost of acquisition, making sure that we're continuing to kind of grow the pie and grow participation in general. So I feel like the infrastructure has been solved for the most part, and now it just becomes more of a traditional kind of, you know, business development game for us.
Yeah. Dani, before we were on stage, you were talking about how you kind of look at a bunch of different research and metrics out there. And I'm curious if you could share with us like what you saw specifically in 2025 that stood out to you.
So yeah, going back to the revenue, if you look at revenue for Helium, in particular, I think maybe 5-6 months ago it jumped and it hasn't looked back. Now it's running at like $1.7 million per month. Like if you analyze that, little over like 20 million. And something else that happened was that HNT rewards were cut down by half in August. So now, for the past 3 months, Helium has been running, or like net income, like they're making money, right? And that to me just like, that's like the actual proof that Helium is working. Like I think once you get to that stage that like you are not just incentivizing people to use your network, you're actually willing to pay net. That's like the thing that like kind of jumped to me. And then obviously Helium Mobile, like the amount of subscribers that they're getting month to month, I think like past couple months are like 50,000 or like even 60,000 last month. So yeah, like they are killing it basically.
What would you say are kind of some of the regulatory unlocks then that have brought more expansion to this space in 2025?
I think it's just having to waste less money on lawyers and less time, more importantly.
Fair.
It's just like, you can just do stuff faster, which is really nice. I think Helium has benefited from that. Though, to go back to your economics point, I think what we're going to see in the next like 6 months or so is we're going to test, does burn and mint equilibrium actually work? All right, and like I was one of the people who helped popularize burn mint equilibrium back in like 2019, and it always made so much sense to me that obviously if the network goes deflationary, then you're making tokens more scarce and the price should go up, and then you get the nice flywheel that we've talked about quite a bit. And now we are seeing some networks go deflationary. For example, HiveMapper, and Ariel's back there in the audience. HiveMapper was deflationary last month, right? I think Helium is close.
I think we had a few, we had a period where we kind of ebb and flow in and out of deflationary.
Yeah, and so the market has kind of left DePIN tokens for dead. Like no one is re-underwriting them, right? Like people looked at this stuff back like a few years ago, and then they came to their conclusions, and they haven't had a reason to revisit it. But if burn mint equilibrium actually works, and then you see the commensurate response from the market, it could be extremely reflexive, because it'll cause people to pay attention again and re-underwrite it and understand that right now the problem that DePINs more broadly and Helium specifically have is not a lack of demand. It's actually a lack of enough supply to satisfy all the demand that they have. And like you need some sort of catalyst to get investors over the activation energy required to re-underwrite something. And my hope is that with these things going to deflation now, like in the next 6 months or so, we have that catalyst and people re-underwrite it.
I think a thing I would add on to that is the reality is DePIN in general doesn't benefit from the speculative premium that a lot of other tokens have because of the fact that it is a cash flow generating asset. It is something where, again, like if you look at history, So go back to the 90s. We don't need all these extra cell phone towers. Landlines are fine. And then you go see the value that actually accrued to all this. Again, it kind of flows 10 years later. Same thing in early 2000s. We need all these data centers. No, we've overinvested. We're not actually going to need all these things. Same thing there. Cloud computing. There's no way the enterprise is going to trust cloud computing. It's all a fad. So physical networks, while I think the value appreciation might lag, ultimately physical networks are the strongest network effect, and they are sticky once they actually have the value recognized. But I do think we're just dealing with a market lag to be recognized. And to Tushar's point, some catalysts will bring that attention back where you're seeing utilization, you're seeing the value that is actually there and the demand side pressure. It just needs to be recognized by the market, and something's going to drive that.
Do you have any thoughts on what that catalyst would be?
One of it is, I think some of it is just like time in terms of people realizing I'm kind of tired of crypto casino. I'm tired of like this industry being kind of run on something that is a little bit too short-sighted versus what is kind of long-term durable. What is the thing that is, hopefully just a cultural shift back to fundamentals in general of like what is actually generating cash? What is seeing that kind of demand side outside of crypto ecosystems? So again, that's where I think for the projects that are doing it well, like us, like HiveMapper, like folks in the energy space, kind of edge compute, again, I think that is still, I'm certainly a long-term believer in it. Otherwise, I would not be in this seat. It's just, again, like maybe some of it's a cultural shift, but these guys may be able to weigh on what other catalyst might help the market recognize that.
Oh, I'll give another punchy answer. It's the price. Let's
Maybe Scott can't say that, but you could say that. Yeah.
Huh?
I can at this point.
Yeah, right.
It's the price. Like that's one of my biggest learnings in crypto was the price is the news, and price leads sentiment. Sentiment does not lead price. Now, look, I can't sit here and make an absolute prediction. I have no crystal ball. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what is the catalyst that causes people to revisit it is like the price has to do better. And if that happens, then that causes everyone to be like, what am I missing here? Like we saw this example actually recently. Some of you might have seen, like everyone was excited about Zcash. Out of nowhere. Like this thing is like 10 years old, kind of left for dead, and then out of nowhere, everyone's excited about it. Do you think they were excited because something fundamentally happened? Or do you think they got excited and decided to re-underwrite the technology and the network because the price went up? And actually, like there was a significant technological upgrade. Their new Zashi wallet is super smooth, really easy to use, but like no one underwrote that first. First they were like, why does this thing keep going up? And then they're like, oh, it's because this wallet is so awesome, and it enables these shielded transactions, and the shielded pool is getting bigger, and so the privacy set is bigger, and there is a return to scale or a network effect around having a bigger privacy pool, and so that's why it's going up. But first the price happened, then people came up with the reason for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think a lot of people pay attention to those types of things. Especially when they go up. When they go down, nobody wants to talk about it, though. When it kind of comes to H&T's reward utilization and coverage, if you could kind of think of like another economic layer to implement in the new year or even the next few years, what would that kind of look like?
In terms of incentives around like just the kind of like how we're like just more like where rewards are, where like just the incentives around H&T. Is that
yeah.
Kind of, Yeah, I think that, look, there's a lot of stuff of, being one of, call it pioneers. We didn't say we pioneered DePIN so much of it. I think that we kind of catalyzed a lot of the space of like kind of the idea of consumerizing mining and everything that kind of built the kind of DePIN subsector as we know it. Plenty of lessons learned, things that probably would not do again if we look back to 2019. But I think obviously where most of the rewards being around data traffic right now, layering in one of the things that we're focusing on with quality of service right now is a huge unlock for us. It is the fact that enterprise telco looks at what's historically a black box. So let me, a little more context on this really quickly is if you've got a large carrier, whether that's Vodafone, Deutsche Telekom, Docomo, if they are looking to roam into an indoor venue, they don't necessarily know other than like the phones are being connected. not anything around uptime of those access points, not anything around kind of bandwidth, throughput. And it's one of the things that we're bringing into the equation, which is actually exciting all of these wireless nerds when we go to these other conferences, that we actually have quality of service metrics. And I think that's the thing that if we could layer in more of that, of yes, you're pushing data through, but the idea that you're getting more, more rewards of, it's almost the idea of how do you bring an SLA on chain? How do you actually, so service level agreement, how do you actually have that quality that is actually represented where, yes, you're pushing data through, but also I know that I can rely on all of these specific access points because they're online 99% of the time, low latency, high throughput. So I think that that is something where the more we can incentivize that side versus just I'm online, absolutely going to speak to the quality for all these other carriers that we're talking to. So we have those metrics to it, but I think that if we could bake it more into the incentive model, certainly just improves the quality, and I think that the reputation around Helium to have that aligned.
Danny, do you have those metrics?
Well, yeah, I think Scott kind of took my answer there. I was also going to talk about quality of service, but like, if I could think of something else, I think you could like devise like kind of targeted campaigns. So like, if there's an area that you think should be served and it's not being served because like you or like the carriers or like whoever doesn't think that they would get enough rewards, but like you as a company, it's like you want to have some kind of social impact and like actually change people's lives and be like, okay, I think these people should get a better coverage that they have right now. Then you could have some like targeted, again, campaign where you deliver rewards to coverage on that area specifically.
I also want to ask you guys kind of what you see as kind of the differentiating side of, or what would stop traditional carriers from going the route that Helium has per se, especially as it starts to continue to grow, and then we'll probably pay attention to the network effects, the outcomes that we've seen over the recent years, right? Why wouldn't they just go and adopt this as well?
I think there's a few things. I'm like feeling the jet lag kicking in right now too. I think so number one, there's the component that like it could potentially cannibalize one of their other business units of the fact that they have ownership over so much of their infrastructure. Is that eating away at that? What does that actually do to their investor story and kind of their own kind of public equities? The idea that we're saying, hey, we're taking away some of the revenue from our own infrastructure to pass that on and kind of reward out to kind of a community-based model. I think that the kind of narrative around that would be a little bit difficult, number one. I think that, two, just like, you can't understate like the corporate culture change that would be required to do something like that. I don't think it's an easy flip of a switch. The other bit is, one of the things that makes Helium really valuable is the kind of agnosticism that we are effectively we are this global connectivity layer. The idea that you can have this borderless network that any network operator can roam in and out of at will. I don't think that necessarily, again, going back to kind of like corporate DNA, how much would one carrier want to be able to kind of share that resource with other carriers? There's certainly the advantage to them doing that, but I think that like that would be a challenge. The other bit is, kind of talked about this earlier, the power of a physical network is the strongest network effect over a social network, over any other type of marketplace. Having that physical network and that physical footprint is really, really hard to unseat. So I think that there's a few different components of why it would be tremendously difficult for an existing legacy telco operator to completely switch their model to try to do something like this.
I think there's a interesting regulatory reason why carriers won't do this. And it's actually antitrust law or anti-monopoly law. Think about it. Like, how much of the carrier's CapEx is duplicative? Where, Verizon is spending money in a place where AT&T already has coverage and capacity, but they have to put their own radios in because they are required to be separate by the government, right? Like, if they are too big, the government will come in and break them up. But actually, like, the natural tendency for telecom, or for example, for utilities, is a monopoly. You should have one network that other people can build on top of. They can build their own subscribers. They can build their own business model, so on and so forth. But you shouldn't have to waste money on redundant CapEx. And the big carriers have to, because they're basically arms of the government, right? Like, given how much they spend on FCC auctions, like that's where all their excess profits go. If you look at their financials, is just FCC auctions, which is how the system is constructed. So like they are unable to take advantage of that. And a decentralized network, at least so far, has never been the subject of like an antitrust probe. And if it was, like, how would you, HTTPS is like too, SSL is like, has too much market share. We have to break it up. What does that mean exactly? So I think that there's a regulatory reason why a decentralized network can do this in effectively a monopoly way, which is going to be economically more efficient than the way that carriers are able to do it.
So in the long term, how do you kind of see these DePIN networks essentially changing or reshaping the way telecom and connectivity operates?
I think it really comes down to how do spectrum auctions work, number one.
I don't know how they work. How does spectrum-
At a very high level, the government says we have this band of spectrum available, who's going to pay us the most? There's some permissioning around who's allowed to bid and who's not and all this stuff. It's actually quite complicated, but like simply they sell you spectrum. And then you have the exclusive right to broadcast on that spectrum. And they enforce that right with men with guns. So if you break that, they put you in jail, right? So I think number one is, will decentralized networks be able to compete in spectrum auctions? The FCC has to allow that to happen if we want to enable decentralized networks to like really work for coverage, not just capacity. So that's question number one. And then question number two is, what happens with SpaceX and Starlink's direct to cell phone service? And like my bull case is actually the bundle of Helium for capacity and SpaceX for coverage is a better bundle than legacy telcos. Because SpaceX has better coverage. They cover everything on the entire Earth, just maybe not with a ton of capacity. But then you can have something like Helium coordinating the capacity by having all the radios in the commercial locations like this, where people are actually spending a bunch of time.
Yeah, actually, to even kind of go in on that, because we've had, one of our better success stories on kind of emergency response last year is exactly like talks about that complement of SpaceX is the thing that gets you to a venue. It gets you to a space. And yes, they are going to have that direct-to-cell connectivity. It's going to be great for rural. But when you think about that density, when you think about these large venues and all the ones I was mentioning earlier, if SpaceX gets you there, how do you talk to the thousands of phones there on the ground? How do you think about that last-mile solution? And that's one of the absolute sweet spots for Helium. So yes, how do you leapfrog that spectrum problem? It's the idea of that kind of complementary relationship between satellite accessing that point on the planet. How do you talk to the thousands of mobile devices there? That's where Helium comes in, and now you're talking about that. It's capacity with the coverage as well.
And then from the user perspective, how do you kind of think about creating more meaningful participation so there are more market opportunities for them to want to come in?
So I think that kind of touches on how we've thought about activating new markets and how we've kind of shifted our strategy around density, and where like the network business and the subscriber business really work hand in hand. The reason why the subscriber business does well and why you have a more cost-effective way of running a network is because you've built this community-built network effect, and that is when, as we think about kind of new cities and new regions, tying that acquisition on both sides together very, very tightly. So getting in front of these business improvement districts, those cafe owners, the commercial real estate owners, where not only you activate, again, the fact that we can flip existing Wi-Fi networks just to be Helium compatible rather than net new hardware. So you're turning on these regions, you're creating a community effect around the supply side, and then you're activating a subscriber base right alongside that. It's one of the things that I think also we've kind of shifted our mindset of as we abstract the crypto part away. On the subscriber side, it's Cloud Points. It's a loyalty program just by a different name. How you give people more reasons to believe. I think that we've gone through a kind of, again, this new branding exercise of why is helium matter and why it's interesting? It's rebuilding connectivity. It's a 100-year-old model that needs to flip, that the cost savings should be passed to you, and just hammering that home constantly over and over of where all the benefits and the value flows to you, the end consumer. So the story matters. The why matters.
Amazing. Well, Scott, Tushar, Dani, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. And thank you to everyone for listening in.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you.